The ad was 6 lines long and smelled like a dare. 1968 Camaro, non-runner, $700. Bring trailer, no trades. Maria Kincaid read it 3 times in the washed-out light of her phone, thumb hovering, as if hesitation could make the car better or worse by itself. $700 was grocery money and rent's sliver, and the kind of bet a person makes when the quiet voice inside won't stop saying you're still allowed to want something. She went anyway, because wanting was the only engine she had that never quit. A crow followed her for half the drive out of town, black wings beating against a sky the color of old nickels, as though even the bird suspected this wasn't a simple errand. The address resolved into a mailbox with chipped paint and a gravel lane that cut through hayfields like the sentence too long for breath. At the end stood a house that had lost the argument with time, and a garage with its door kinked halfway, stuck like a yawn. She parked, palms slightly damp on the steering wheel of her ancient Ranger, and saw it. A faded, primer-patched shell of a Camaro on 4 mismatched tires, its once sharp shoulders softened by dust and neglect. The lines were all still there, the Coke bottle waist, the confident slope of the roof, the way the rear quarter seemed to flex even at rest. It looked like a fighter asleep on its stool. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're from. If this story moves you, please subscribe. Tomorrow, I have a special story for you. A man stepped from the shadow of the door, lean, knuckly, wearing a veteran's cap that had seen more sun than fabric. His eyes were the pale blue of washed denim and something else Maria recognized from hospital waiting rooms: distance. "You the one who texted?" he asked. "That's me." Her voice landed steadier than she felt. "Maria." "Cal." He didn't offer a hand, but he looked at hers as if weighing the story behind its scars. "Cash?" "I brought it," she said, and realized it sounded like a confession. They circled the car as if it might startle. The trunk lid was off, leaning against a workbench like a misplaced shield. The grill was a toothless smile. The long hood wore a chalked VIN like a name written on a hospital bracelet. And yet, Maria could feel the phantom weight of a V8 rumbling under that skin, the way power feels like a promise you can't quite afford. "What's wrong with it?" she asked. "What's right with it?" Cal returned, dry as corn husks. Then softer. "Sat a long time. Been in and out of a few hands. I got it for my nephew. He never came back to get it." He said the sentence carefully, as if stepping over a place in the floor he knew might break. She crouched and ran her fingers along the rocker panel, rust flaked like edited words. "Frame?" "Straight as far as I can tell." He nudged the front tire with the toe of his boot. "No motor, no trans. It's a bones and bucket deal." She should have walked. There was a spreadsheet in her head that whistled at her like a tea kettle. Tuition balance, the rent increase, the brake pad she had been nursing past their patience. But the first time she'd seen a 68 nose at a stoplight when she was 12, her mother laughing at the way she leaned forward in the passenger seat like prayer, something had taken root. Wanting again. "700, she said. "7. He watched her count it out on the hood, 20s smoothed flat by habit. When he handed her a title that had changed names twice and a bill of sale written in slanted patience, she felt the odd, bright heat of being trusted by a stranger. There was power in the transaction, but also a kind of absolution. "Need help loading?" he asked. "I brought a winch and a friend," she nodded toward the road. As on cue, Janine's battered Suburban swung into the lane, dragging a flatbed trailer that squeaked its own nervous soundtrack. Janine slid out, a Bowie knife grin under a cap that said, "Girls Wrench 2." "So, this is the mistress. She's uglier than the photos. I love her." They worked in the slow, careful choreography of 2 women who had learned the hard way that nobody was coming to lift their end. The winch sang, the trailer grumbled, the Camaro's front wheels popped under the deck with a sulky hop. Cal guided with 2 fingers on the cowl as if whispering to a horse. When it was done, the car sat centered like a sleeping animal they didn't want to wake. "Why me?" Maria blurted, surprising herself. "Why not list it higher? Wait for some guy with a truck who says, 'bro,' between every 3rd word." Cal's mouth made a shape that wasn't exactly a smile. Because you got here early. People who show up early, they usually show up again. Besides, his eyes flicked to the Camaro and back. I'm tired of men who don't love anything they can't flip. She didn't know then how important the word love would turn out to be.
They strapped the shell down, signed where needed, and traded the awkward goodbyes of two people who weren't built for small talk. Cal touched the fender once, a poem to her forehead, a blessing, or a goodbye. Mireya felt it as a weight she was borrowing and a responsibility she hadn't yet earned. On the drive back, Janine kept one eye on the straps in the rear view and the other on Mireya's face. "You okay?" "Ask me when she's in the bay." "Which one is she?" Janine teased, "because the other she is going to be mad." "Bills can fight me," Mireya said, and this time her voice cracked like a door swelling in humidity. Janine reached across the console and squeezed her knee without looking, the fine art of comforting without asking. They'd met in a night class called Introduction to Automotive Systems, and somewhere between thermodynamics and torque specs had decided to become the kind of family you choose. They backed the trailer into Bay 3 of the co-op shop they rented from a guy named Taps, who was always at least 3 beers into the day and somehow the most reliable landlord in the county. Fluorescent lights flickered their blessing. The shop smelled like solvent and coffee and an old jukebox that would not, could not, stop playing Al Green whenever anyone touched it. "You really did it," Janine whispered, as if speaking too loud might make the car evaporate. "She'll need everything." "I need everything," Mireya said, and surprised herself with the humor in it. She was tired in the bone-deep way you only get when the thing you've been holding up finally has a place to rest. They rolled the Camaro off the trailer like a ceremony and set her on jack stands. Janine fetched the whiteboard and uncapped a marker with her teeth. "Okay, list of sins. Body, paint, wiring, interior. Oh Lord, look at that dash. Suspension, brakes, wheels, glass, weather stripping, powertrain," Mireya added. The word tasted like possibility. "What's your poison?" Shannon asked. "Small block? Big block? LS swap that will make the purists write hate mail?" "Don't know yet." Mireya ran a hand along the fender's curve and felt dust paint her palm. "It felt like I should ask her first." "You're naming her?" "I'll know it when I say it out loud and the air agrees." Janine laughed, but there was respect in it. "She'll pull the wheels. You want to start with the trunk?" The trunk was a country of its own, a shallow sea of leaves, a jack from a different car, spider nests mummified by time. Under it all, a thin shape tucked against the rear panel like a secret, wrapped in oilcloth and a grocery bag's rustle. "What's that?" Janine asked, peering over the lip. "Feels like a plate." Mireya reached in. The oilcloth stuck to her glove like old gum. She peeled it back to reveal a rectangle of metal that had been stamped and restamped. It wasn't a VIN plate. The characters were wrong, the spacing crude, and yet it vibrated with the hush of something that mattered. "Homemade tag," Janine offered, "from when somebody did something they didn't tell the DMV about." Mireya held it up to the light. The characters read 9736X-Copo. A whisper like a door opening went through her. Copo, Central Office Production Order. The back door that dealers with clout had used to order cars with parts that shouldn't exist on a factory invoice. The old legends about iron block bruisers that hid under plain paint and rubber floor mats. "No way," she breathed. "What?" "Nothing. Could be nothing," she lied, because superstition is its own torque value. She slid the tag back into the oilcloth and into a zip bag with the kind of tenderness you reserve for newborns and paper-thin glass. Her heartbeat had changed keys. They worked until the clock unfurled into midnight. Janine told her 3 times to go home, shower, sleep. Mireya ignored the first 2, then admitted that her hands were trembling from coffee and adrenaline. She locked the bay, checked the straps on nothing, checked the world twice. At home, her apartment felt like a waiting room seat she couldn't get comfortable in. The Camaro had already put its outline inside her head. Everything else seemed flat without it. She set the bag tagged on the kitchen counter like it could charge in moonlight. When sleep finally found her, it brought a dream of a car idling under her skin and a man's voice she didn't know saying, "It isn't what you think it is, and it's exactly what you think it is." Morning pushed her awake. She scribbled numbers on a napkin while the kettle hissed. Budget columns, a parts list that kept revising itself. She Googled Copo until the internet started offering her forum threads like breadcrumbs. She told herself none of it mattered until she had proof. But proof is just belief with paperwork, and her belief had already kicked off its shoes and moved in.
Her phone buzzed at 9:12 a.m. Unknown caller. She almost let it ring out, the way we all do now, as if we can starve bad news by ignoring it. Then she thought, "Cal," and answered. "Miss Kincaid?" The voice was rasped raw, like his throat had sanded itself. "Cal? Can you meet me?" A cough like a door being forced. "At the house." Everything in her went still. She was halfway to her keys before she spoke. "Is everything okay?" "No." The word arrived without apology. "Bring the title." The drive back felt shorter because dread puts its own engine under you. When she turned into the gravel lane, Cal was already outside, a sweater thrown over his shoulders in a way that made him look younger and older at once. He held a shoebox like it weighed 1,000 pounds. "Did I do something wrong?" she asked, before the truck had even shuddered to a stop. "Not yet, but we both might." He led her to the garage, now sunlit in a way that made its dust look curated. Inside, the smell of old grease and mouse droppings had receded under a cleaner scent she couldn't place. Cedar? He set the box on the workbench and didn't open it. "Title," he said, and she handed it over like a child returning a library book on the last day of a summer that had been too short. Cal took a pen from behind his ear and drew a neat line beneath his signature. He murmured, "I need to add something." He wrote with the precise, careful strokes of a man who had filled out forms that determined what came home and what didn't. When he finished, he slid the paper back. Below the purchase details, he had written in block caps, "Includes contents of box." Mireya looked at the box. "What's in it?" "Things I should have burned, and a thing I promised I'd deliver." His fingers pressed the lid edges without lifting them, the way you brace yourself on the edge of a hospital bed before the truth sits down beside you. He inhaled like lighting a match. "That car," he said, nodding toward the ghost of where the Camaro had been, "wasn't supposed to exist. It's a thing that got built between the lines, men who knew what to ask for and how to not write it down. I thought I could keep it a secret by letting it rot. Rot's still a kind of attention." He lifted the lid. Inside lay a ledger bound in cracked green, a small velvet pouch the color of a bruise, an envelope sealed with something darker than glue, and a key on a chain with a stamped brass tag, Locker 47. Her breath caught dumbly on the number. 47 sounded like a random, and also like every riddle she'd ever almost solved. Cal touched the ledger first. "This is lists," he said. "Parts, dates, names that shouldn't line up but do." He tapped the envelope. "This is what happens when names line up." His knuckles skimmed the velvet pouch. "That's a ring. Not his, but it should have been." He held up the key like it was a sentence. "And this is an apology I'm late delivering." "To who?" Mireya asked. "To the person the car belongs to," he said simply. "Not by law, by story." He slid the ledger toward her. The first page had neat columns: date, order, note. The handwriting matched the careful anger in Cal's scrawl on the title. Some dates were familiar even to her. Spring of '68, the months where the rumors about secret Camaros sprouted like weeds in mailboxes. A name repeated itself: H.L. Stanton. Then another with underlines: G.Y.E. The rest was smudged by what looked like a thumb. She traced the indent where the pen had pressed hard enough to bruise the paper.
My brother, Cal said quietly. Hayes. He wasn't good at the right things, but he could hear an engine the way some men hear their mothers. His face altered as he said the name, the way people change when a room gains or loses a ghost. He got in with some fancy boys. Promises were made. Cars were arranged. Mireya looked up. Arranged? Built using doors that weren't meant for folks like us. Cal's mouth went dry on the words. They put together a piece that could skin a Shelby and leave him smiling about it. Then a thing happened. If I say it plain, I'll spit. So I'll say it soft. The car got used wrong. Her hand tightened on the ledger. Wrong how? Night before Christmas Eve, 68. A man with too much money and not enough patience made a bet with fate. Bank envelopes, a back door. My brother driving the thing he loved best, not knowing the names in the back seat until the door shut. He swallowed. They said nobody would get hurt. They said a lot of things. She felt the blue steel of dread lay itself across her shoulders. Was anyone shot? The word arrived like a casing hitting concrete. Yes, not dead, but almost. And almost is a word that grows teeth in the dark. The room seemed to tilt. The camshaft posters on the wall leaned in like eavesdroppers. Mireya tried to put herself in Hayes's hands. She could feel the tremble and the iron both. What happened to him? She asked.
He ran, Cal said, because they told him to, because he thought running would lead trouble away from the wrong house. His mouth shaped something like grief and irritation sharing a cigarette. He left the car with me, said he'd be back for it when it was safe. He wasn't wrong often, but he was wrong then. Is he? She didn't want to finish the question because finishing it makes it exist. Gone, Cal said. Not dead the way men mean it, but gone in the way that means no Christmas cards, no birthdays, no suddenly turning up at your door needing $20 and a promise. He pushed the key across the bench. It clicked against the wood like punctuation. Locker 47 is at the bus depot on Ash. I don't like that, but that's where it is. Been paying cash every month to keep it quiet. Can't do that no more. My hands shake paying for anything but bread. What's inside? Mireya asked, though she knew better than to trust answers when the question's shadow was bigger than the room. An engine, he said. The engine. If the ledger says true, it's a heart that was supposed to go in a car like yours, built by men who wrote their initials in places only God and Greece could find. His laugh was humorless. And something else. What else? He met her eyes then, and she understood that he had switched from the story he could manage to the story he feared. An envelope like that one, but for someone who never got it, he said. If the man who lost his blood that night had gotten what was owed, the car could have been a headline instead of a whisper. Mireya took in the ledger, the ring pouch, the sealed manila thick with whatever it held. Her life had already been a precarious stack. Now someone had put their foot against it and pushed. Still, there was clarity in the tilt, as if falling taught you what mattered. Why me? She asked again. But the question had matured overnight. Because you put your name on a promise, Cal said, tapping the title. Because you looked at rust and didn't flinch. Because when you held that car's fender, you looked like a person who would listen when a thing asked to be finished. He paused. Because I am not brave enough to be the last man who knows the truth and dies with it. Janine would tell her later that this was the moment she should have said no, that alternate lives unspooled like film reels in that breath. The version where Mireya said, I can't afford the gasoline of other people's ghosts, and drove away. But the person she was reached for the ledger instead. Okay, we'll do it right. Right, Cal echoed, and the word made something in his shoulders unclench. He slid the velvet pouch toward her. It clicked against the wood like punctuation. Inside lay a ring of simple gold, whose only ornament was a tiny stamped bow tie on the inner band, and 3 initials engraved so finely they felt like a secret. H.L.S. She slipped it onto the pad of her thumb, where it stopped. Heat rose to her face at the intimacy of it. Someone's promise, someone's last honest purchase, someone's circle that got broken. Hayes L. Stanton, Cal said. That ring bought him 5 months of hope, and then 40 years of shame. I tried to return it to the girl. He shook his head. She moved to a town with a name so small the map needed a magnifying glass. And when I got there, the man at the feed store said cancer had already beat me. Maria closed her fingers around the ring until its circle pressed a clean hurt into her palm. We'll give it a home, she murmured, and heard how reckless and holy that sounded. When she reached for the envelope, Cal caught her wrist. Not here, and not yet. Read it where there's good light and someone who can tell you when to stop. It has the kind of truth that bites. She nodded, throat tight. Let me take you to breakfast. You look like you haven't eaten anything that wasn't an apology in a week. He smiled then, a sideways, surprised thing. You sound like your mother, he said, and then looked startled at himself for saying it. I don't know your mother. Sorry, it's just... He gestured vaguely at her face, which felt like it had been carved into focus by the morning. You have that way of making a man feel like he can admit he's tired. They ate at a place with chipped mugs and pancakes bigger than the plates. Cal told her about Hayes and Scraps, as if the story might spook if told too smooth. Maria told him about the first time she had set valve lash by sound instead of spec, and the way her chest had widened like the bay doors do when they roll up. They made a plan like people build rafts, board by board, rope by rope, knowing the river is a thing that has its own ideas, but grateful to have something you can hold. They parted in the parking lot under a sky that had decided to unwrinkle and be blue for a while. Today, Cal said, tapping the key in her palm, if you can. I'd like to sleep once in my old age.
I'll call you from the depot, she promised. Don't call, he said, and the fear in his eyes startled her. Come back. The bus depot on Ash had pretended for decades that it was not a place where lives changed. It had plastic seats and a soda machine that took bills with sighs and coughed out regret in aluminum. The lockers along the back wall were dull with fingerprints and coins and days. Locker 47 had a dent like a dimple and a padlock that had no right to still be doing its job. Maria slid the key in. It fought her for a second, then surrendered with the exact sound locks make in movies when they decide plot matters. Inside sat a plastic crate that had lived in the dark long enough to grow shy. She lifted it with both hands and startled at the weight. Engines have mass, even when they're in pieces and disguised. A machinist's towel covered the top like a flag. She set the crate on a bench beneath a flickering light and pulled the towel back. Foam carefully cut, and then valve covers stamped with a bow tie at a code she recognized as if someone had said her name, a distributor with a hand-scribed mark. A build sheet laminated between plastic, like someone had tried to make paper immortal. At the bottom, wrapped like a relic, a cam card signed by a name she had seen on sites that did not allow casual language. Her eyes blurred. She blinked hard. Under the cam card lay a second, thinner envelope, the twin to the one in Cal's box. It had a name on it in Hayes' hand, Ruth Delaney. Maria sat down hard, the bench complaining under her. The name rang a faint bell, maybe from a footnote in the ledger, maybe from a piece of gossip that had survived long enough to fossilize. She set the envelope on her knee and propped her chin in her other hand like a woman trying to balance a life on the knife of a decision. Her phone vibrated in her pocket. A text from an unknown number split the screen. Don't open anything until we talk. C. She glanced around the depot, suddenly aware that people have a way of being present when they shouldn't. A man in a navy coat read a newspaper he wasn't reading. A kid kicked a duffel in a pattern that wasn't boredom. The vending machine hummed harder than physics. She closed the crate, slid the envelope back inside, and lifted the weight into her arms. Outside, the wind had picked up and was practicing being a winter. She walked fast, without running. The ranger's door protested as it always did, an old promise that refused to be healed. She set the crate on the passenger seat and buckled it in, because superstition again. Back at the co-op, Janine whistled when she saw the crate. "That the thing?" "It's a thing," Maria said, and put the crate on the workbench as if it could bruise. She lifted the towel and watched Janine's face do the math. "Oh," Janine whispered, reverent. "Oh, honey, that's somebody's chapel. Locker 47, bus depot. You went alone?" Janine's voice had acquired edges. "Cal asked me to go today. He looked—" She searched for a word that wasn't fragile. He looked like he needed the story to be carried by someone else for a minute. Janine touched the cam card like a person might touch a saint's robe. "We're in it now. We were in it the second I counted out $700 on a hood. This is just the part where the lights come up." They inventoried the crate with the solemn joy of archivists. Under the parts lay a Polaroid, the Camaro, glossy and grin-wicked, parked under a street lamp with Christmas tinsel winking from a storefront window behind it. Two men leaned against the fender, hazed by the caption on the back, and a second whose face someone had thumbed over in the emulsion, the way you erase a name from a list when you don't want to read it anymore. Maria's phone buzzed again, another unknown number, but maybe not unknown. "Where are you? Need to see you. Important. Cal." She typed back, "Shop. You okay?" The reply came quicker than fear. "Coming. Don't let anyone in you don't know." Janine read the text over her shoulder and then locked the bay door with a crank that made a sound like an anchor being raised. I hate when old men suddenly become specific. Me too. Maria tucked the envelope with Ruth Delaney's name into her jacket. It lay over her heart with a precise gravity. "We'll wait." They made coffee that tasted like a hardware store and drank it sitting on milk crates. The Camaro shell looming like a question mark with muscles. The shop felt like a ship in a storm, a contained world that moved with whatever chose to batter it. Cal's truck pulled into the lot faster than his age should allow. He didn't park so much as arrive and cease movement. He slipped inside with the speed of someone being followed but not wanting to confirm it. His eyes did a quick sweep and landed on the crate, then on Maria's face, then on her jacket where the envelope rested invisibly. He exhaled like he'd reached shore. "You got it," he said. "I did."
"We got company coming," he said, and the way he said company made the word wear a different suit. "Not cops. Worse." Janine shifted, hand sliding into the pocket where she kept a wrench that had solved disputes before. "Define worse?" "Men who love money more than sleep," he said, "and men who love being owed." "How do they know?" Mireya asked, because the line between fear and fury is a fraction of an inch, and she had just crossed it without noticing. "I told one of them once that if he kept digging, he'd find worms," Cal said. He didn't stop digging. He pointed at the crate. "We can't let him take that, not because it's worth what it is, but because it's what it is. It's a map that points to a debt." Mireya nodded and felt the click of decision in her bones, the way a breaker trips to protect a house. "What do we do?" Cal looked at the Camaro, then at the ceiling, as if God might be hiding in the rafters, flipping through a manual. "We finish something," he said. "Today, right now, we take what belongs to that car and put it where it was always supposed to be." Janine lifted her chin. "You want to put that heart in that body with 3 people, a cherry picker that whines like a toddler, and a fuel system that's currently theoretical." "Just a test fit," Cal said, and his voice steadied as if the words gave him a place to stand. "We need to make it one thing, not pieces. People steal pieces. They hesitate to steal a whole." "Bullies steal whatever they can get their hands on," Janine muttered, but she was already clearing the workbench, efficient as triage. They moved like a team that had been waiting for the whistle. The hoist creaked, the chain found its hook, the engine's block found a sky it hadn't seen since men wore beards like revolutions. Cal's hands knew where to go without being told.
And for a moment, Mireya saw the ghost of the man he had been building alongside his brother in a garage where summer nights got caught in the fan belt and refused to leave. The block hovered over the engine bay like a blessing held just shy of landing. That was when the headlights painted the far wall, the slow roll of a big vehicle, the kind that could carry the word crew without exaggeration. Tires crunched gravel with the pleased sound of boots on a porch they didn't own. A horn tapped twice, almost polite. "Keep going," Cal said, barely above a whisper. "They can't cut what they can't grab." Mireya set her hand on the engine stand, the metal cold through her glove. She looked at the envelope inside her jacket and felt, unmistakably, the heartbeat of the car align with her own. Outside, the bay door rattled as knuckles rapped in a rhythm that said familiarity without invitation. A voice came through the metal, smooth as oil and twice as slick. "Afternoon. We're here for a package and a story." Cal closed his eyes for a single second, the way you do before you pick something heavier than you are. When he opened them, they were the color of galvanized steel. "Don't open that door, no matter what they say." The rapping became a knock, became a pounding. Janine picked up the breaker bar like a bat and grinned the way a person grins when their hands are shaking and they choose humor instead of fear. The hoist groaned, the engine swung into position with the careful grace of a chandelier in a house with bad foundations. "Time," said the voice outside. "Still courteous, still wrong. Or we make our own." The first hinge bolt on the bay door shrieked as pressure found its patience. The envelope in Mireya's jacket seemed to heat against her ribs. She glanced at Cal. He didn't look at her, but he nodded, the kind of nod that means all green lights are gone and the only road left is through. She tightened the chain. Janine steadied the block. The door's center panel flexed and popped, and the light that speared through was white and hard and full of the kind of afternoon that eats decisions for lunch. "Mireya," Cal said softly, never taking his eyes off the engine. "When that door goes, move to the fuse box. Kill the lights on my count. 3, 2... The door exploded inward, and the world became headlights, boot soles, and the smell of cold air that hadn't agreed to be invited.
This story took us a long time. If you like it, subscribe. Now back to the story. The door exploded inward, and the world became headlights, boot soles, and the smell of cold air that hadn't agreed to be invited. Mireya didn't think, she moved. The fuse box lived behind a steel panel stamped with a warning nobody obeyed. Her shoulder hit it hard enough to wake the bruise she'd been collecting since morning. Fingers found the main breaker. She yanked down. Darkness fell like a stage cue. The only light left was what spilled through the ruined bay door and the thin, holy blue of welding arcs from some other shop 2 buildings over. Headlights carved the room into moving slabs. Shadows stepped through them, 3, then 4, then 5. The lead man was average, the way an empty bottle is average until it's thrown. His hair was gray at the edges, his jaw too clean. He held his hands out like a man entering church and trying to appear humble. "Afternoon," he said, again, voice smooth as oil, warmed by hands. "We're here for the crate." Cal didn't turn from the hoist. "Wrong address," he said. His tone made even the dark take notice. The man's eyes adjusted. They found Mireya by the fuse box, traveled to Janine with the breaker bar, and settled on the engine hovering over the Camaro's empty bay. He smiled like he already knew the answer and just wanted to hear it spoken. "Locker 47 has a way of talking," he said. "We heard it say your names." "That locker doesn't have a mouth. You want to leave with all your teeth? Try a different line." Something like amusement flicked across the man's face. "My name is Cole," he offered, as if etiquette could launder intrusion. "I represent parties who loaned Mr. Stanton a dream back when men were hungrier and the interest rates on hunger weren't printed." "Those parties don't own anything here," Cal said. Cole's eyes clicked to him. "On the contrary, we own memory, and memory accrues." He gestured, and 2 men peeled off, spreading along the wall like cold water. "We'll take the crate and whatever you fetched from the bus station today. Consider it back interest on a favor stretched thin." Maria breathed through her nose, kept her back to the panel. In the dark, she could hear the engine's chains sing a little under stress, metal speaking the language of weight. She thought of her mother counting out medication in a hurricane, hands steady while the wind tore the roof apart. You do the next thing, then the next. "The crate stays here," she said, surprising herself with how calm the words sounded on their way out. "The cam card, the build sheet, everything stays with the car. That's the point." Cole watched her like a mathematician trying to enjoy poetry. "And you are." "Person who paid her bills enough to own the title," Janine snapped. "Person who's going to call the sheriff if you don't go practice your manners on another block." Something like amusement flicked across Cole's face. "The sheriff owes us a lawnmower," he said. "We repossessed it. He'll understand." Cal shifted, just enough to make the hoist creak. "You can't take what belongs to someone else. Not anymore." "It belonged to us the moment the first envelope went missing. You remember Christmas Eve, Mr. Stanton? You remember red on snow, the smell of metal and bad promises?" Maria felt the words hit his back like thrown stones. He didn't turn. He kept both hands on the chain like a man holding onto a rung over a long drop. "Leave," he said. Cole sighed, a practice thing. "Last chance." He nodded, and one of his men stepped to the crate on the bench. The man had shoulders like a refrigerator and hands like a pair of pliers that never learned softness. "Don't," Maria said. He reached. Janine moved first, a clean, fast pivot, and the breaker bar took the man's wrist with a sound like someone stepping on wet kindling. He howled, and the bar sang a second note against the bench for emphasis. Cole didn't flinch. "Cost of doing business," he said. "Try again." The second man grabbed the crate's edge. Maria was already there, putting her small against his big the way you do when you've learned leverage from engines and not from gym posters. She didn't try to outmuscle him. She shifted the crate inward, flipping it from his grasp and onto the floor behind the bench. The contents were wrapped well enough not to break. The sound it made was the thick, satisfying noise of reality refusing to be convenient. Cole's polite tone sandpapered thinner. "This is tedious," he said. "Mr. Stanton, tell them to stand down." Cal finally looked at him. "I've been standing down 40 years. I don't have any down left."
Cole nodded as if Cal had handed him a stamp he needed. So be it. He lifted his hand. The man nearest the bent doorframe moved for the bay controls, found them dead, and swore. "They killed the lights," he told Cole. "Then we work in the dark," Cole said. He took a step forward, and the hoist dropped half an inch, as if it too had decided to interrupt. Everyone's head snapped to the engine. Everyone held their breath. "Cal," Mireya said. She didn't need to say more. He tightened the chain by feel. The block steadied. Cole's face appeared to contain 2 men now, the charming one and the one with frost behind his teeth. "Last," he began. A siren yelped outside. Not a squad car, an air horn. Then another, lower, longer, like a tugboat had learned to speak truck. Headlights multiplied across the lot, cutting the shop's shadows into thinner and thinner slices. A new silhouette filled the ruined door. A man the signs of a forklift wearing a canvas jacket, a face tattoo of a swallow, and a shirt that said TAPS in letters that did not ask permission to be read. "Taps?" asked, voice as mild as a bull that isn't running yet. Cole's men twitched without moving. Cole himself turned slowly, the better to paint patience onto the motion. "Private property dispute," he said. "We're leaving." "You are," Taps agreed. He stepped aside and revealed the rest. 3 more tenants from the row of bays, 2 with welding masks propped up like visors, 1 with a cutting torch spitting a little dragon, and behind them, as if the universe had decided to lean in, 2 bikers who frequented the diner next door and had never in recorded history let anyone cut a line in front of them at breakfast.
Engines idled outside, a choir of cylinders promising the evening would go one of two ways and that both would be loud. Cole took it in, measured the math, and did what men like him do when the odds go ugly. He smiled for the next time, instead of this one. "We'll be in touch," he told Cal. He looked at Mireya a heartbeat longer than politeness required. A car like that brings friends and enemies. "Good thing we know which is which," Janine said. They left as they had come, without apology and without looking back, because looking back would have been a kind of loss. Taps waited until their taillights vanished into Ash Street traffic before turning to Mireya. "You okay?" he asked. "I think so," she said. Only then did her focus widen enough to take in her trembling hands. She tucked them under her armpits as if she were cold and not rattled. Taps nodded at the hoist. "Finish what you started. People can take pieces. Harder to take a whole." "Already said that," Cal murmured, and in the small grin he shared with Taps, Mireya saw the way men who have spent their lives around noise learn to trust silence more. They worked fast in the glow of two portable work lights Taps rolled in, and a lantern that someone swore had once hung in a mine. The engine settled into the bay like a heart returning to a chest, bolts threading into threads that had waited decades for this exact conversation. Janine slid under with a torque wrench and the work ethic of a roomer. Cal stood on the crossmember, one foot planted, hands gentle. Mireya fed bolts, checked tensions, wiped her palms, and remembered to breathe. The car became less of a question and more of a sentence. When the last mount tightened down, a hush fell, thick, reverent, ridiculous. Taps exhaled softly, tipped an invisible hat, and left to watch the lot for a while longer, because ritual matters. Only then did Cal lean back against the bench and let his legs shake. "I should have burned that ledger," he said, voice half to himself. "You should have delivered it sooner," Janine said, and then regretted the sharpness in her own voice. "Sorry, fear makes me rude." "You're not wrong," Cal admitted. He looked at Mireya, eyes bright with something that wasn't any of the cheaper emotions. "You still in?" "I was in the minute I saw her roofline through the door. Everything since is just me learning the vocabulary." They ate cold pizza standing up, the way victories get eaten when you don't want the chair to steal your momentum. Mireya finally slid the envelope with Ruth Delaney on the front onto the bench between them. "Time," she said. Cal stared at it. "Do we have to?" She said softly. "Because somebody didn't, and that's how we got here." He nodded once. "Then we do it right."
She slit the flap with a box cutter. Inside, on paper that had yellowed into nostalgia, lay a letter in Hayes's hand, and a cashier's check so old the bank's logo belonged to a building that had turned into a deli twice since. The letter was dated 2 days after the robbery that wasn't, addressed to Ruth Delaney, and began in the halting script of a man who has never written his own apology all the way to the end. "Ruth, I was a fool and then a coward. I am trying to be neither long enough to write this straight. The car was used. You know how. You know why. They told me nobody would get hurt. I believed a lie because I liked the way it made the room brighter. You got caught in the dark. The money in this envelope is what they promised you and didn't bring. The parts list is how to make it sing like it should have that night instead of howl. Please take this and leave town, or stay, or build a life that doesn't have my shadow in it. If anybody asks who gave you this, say nobody. If anybody says my name like it's a thing they own, spit. I don't know if I'm a good man. I think I might not be. But I know a good car when I hear it, and your Camaro is good. Let it be good. Don't let it be a headline. If I can make one true thing, let it be this. I didn't mean for it to go like it went. I am sorry in a way that won't stop. H. Beneath the letter, folded into the careful weight of a man who understands bolts and guilt equally, lay a second sheet in a different hand, clean, precise, almost mechanical. It was the build list, It matched the ledger. At the bottom, a stamped imprint. H.L. Stanton, G.Y. The rest was blurred by a smear that could have been oil or tears or both. Ruth Delaney, Mariah said. Who was she? Cal took the letter like it might bite him and read it again. She was a waitress, a sister, a person who should have gotten out clean and didn't. He rubbed the heel of his hand against his forehead. She bought the Camaro off a lot that didn't deserve to sell it. Some men bought her story instead. Hayes promised he'd make it all right, then Christmas Eve and men with more swagger than sense. Do we know where she is? Janine asked. Cal shook his head. I lost the trail after I took the ring to a town that wasn't there anymore. Mariah folded the letter along the original crease, as if respecting the route it had taken through time. Then we find her. Or if we can't, we find her name in a place that isn't paper. You'll bring Cole down on you, Cal warned. He already knows our names, she said. I'd prefer to know mine when I look in a mirror. Janine clicked the torque wrench down to 0, the sound a tiny gavel. We can start with county records. I know a clerk who owes me for fixing her Civic's brake squeal and not charging her embarrassment tax. Tomorrow. Tonight we bolt the last of the doubt down. They stayed until the middle of the night rebuilt itself into something gentler. The co-op row quieted. Taps turned off the lot lights in sections the way you dim a theater. Mariah made a bed for the crate with shop towels and tucked the Polaroid on the bench under a magnet shaped like a spark plug, as if the Camaro could see an old photograph of itself and feel less alone. Cal dozed for 20 minutes in a chair that believed itself to be furniture and not a suggestion. He woke with a start, the way people wake when guilt keeps one hand on their shoulder even in sleep. He looked at the ring on the bench, the envelope, the engine finally sitting where it belonged, and something inside him put down a weight it had been carrying so long that it had fused to bone. You could still sell her, he told Mariah, and when she frowned he added, the car, to someone who can write a check with leftovers, take the money, pay the rent, buy the quiet back. I can't, she said, not because I'm noble, but because I'm curious. I want to hear what she sounds like when she forgives us. He nodded, eyes too bright. Hayes would like you. He'd be afraid of you, and then he'd like you. Morning arrived with the smell of coffee and the sound of the jukebox insisting Al Green could fix anything. The bay door had a plywood patch now, courtesy of Taps, and 2 men who could frame a wall faster than most people could frame an argument. Janine left early to go charm the county clerk and came back with a stack of printouts that smelled like Toter and Victory. Ruth Delaney married once, brief, an address on a street that turned into a highway ramp, then a P.O. box, then nothing. But she tapped a line with a fingernail chipped by a starter solenoid. Ruth Delaney /DBA, RD Motors and Upholstery. That's an LLC filing from 12 years ago. The address is alive. An upholstery shop? Mariah said, hope uncurling like a cat in sunlight. Janine grinned. Where else do ghosts go to get stitched up?
They drove out in the Ranger, because that was the car that had started this, and because the Camaro would have to wait its turn to see the world. The address lived 30 miles away, in a town that smelled like cottonseed and brake dust, in a strip of businesses that shared a sign and a single good idea that bounced between them like a pinball. Survival. RD Motors and Upholstery had a front window full of vinyl samples and a bench seat from an era when cars believed in couching. The bell over the door rang the same way it must have rung for decades. A woman looked up from a sewing machine with a presser foot like a small moon. Her hair was white blonde in the way that happens neither in youth nor in bottles. Her eyes did the inventory that people do when nothing surprises them and everything matters. Help you? She asked. We're looking to find Ruth Delaney, Mariah said. You found her, the woman said. Usually when people say that, I'm not pleased. Today I'll be civil until you convince me otherwise. Mariah opened her mouth and found her throat suddenly full. Janine, unflappable by design, stepped in.
We have something that belongs to your story, and a question about a car. Ruth's gaze sharpened at the last word. What car? Camaro, Maria said, 1968. You bought one that should have been impossible. Men made it harder. Ruth stared at her for a long time, and in that stare were winters and summers and a night that refused to end. When she spoke, her voice landed like a folded tarp, heavy, practical. You from the bank? No. Maria pulled the envelope from her jacket. We're from the future of a promise. Ruth didn't reach for it. She said, I gave up believing in those. What's in it? A letter. From Hayes Stanton. If you say a name with enough years on it, the air changes. Ruth's did. He's dead? Gone, Cal said from the doorway, and Ruth looked past Maria like lightning had just struck twice in the same county. Cal, she said, not because she was pleased or angry, but because the name had been waiting in her mouth and didn't want to wait anymore. He tipped his cap and said, I should have come sooner. You should have done a lot of things sooner, she replied. Then she sighed, some of the iron leaving her posture. But you came, and you brought something. Maria set the envelope on the counter. Ruth opened it with a quick, neat motion, read the letter with her mouth pressed flat, then flipped the check over and barked a laugh that had no mirth in it. This would have bought a house then. Now it barely buys rubber. We can cash it against the story, Janine said. There's interest on dignity. Ruth looked at Maria again. Why you? Because I put my name on a title and didn't sleep for the right reasons. Because I found a crate in a locker and it didn't feel like parts, it felt like obligation. Because I wanted the car when I shouldn't, and now I want the truth. Ruth folded the letter and slid it back into the envelope with a care bordering on contempt. Hayes was a song I almost sang. He had eyes like someone had left a porch light on for him his whole life. Then men with debts made him a stranger to himself. I packed the Camaro with everything that would make it honest and hid it. When I couldn't hide it anymore, I sold it to a lot that took my shoes and offered me a receipt. I started sewing other people's promises for money. She brushed the back of her wrist under one eye, impatient with wet. What do you want from me? For you to see it, if you want. To hear it. To decide what happens to it when it can move under its own power again. Ruth stared at her in a way that made Maria want to straighten her posture and her soul. You gonna ask me to sign something? Only the dash, Janine said deadpan. Silver paint marker. Real small.
Ruth's bark of a laugh returned with a truer note. You're trouble, she said to Janine. And you, she pointed at Maria, you're the kind of fool that makes a place better. Bring the car when it runs. I'll decide then if I'm mad or grateful. On the drive back, Cal sat quieter than any man with opinions has a right to sit. Finally, he said, she should have had a life without this. Maybe this is the life she made to fit, Janine said, not the one she was given. Back at the shop, the day had warmed into the kind that makes oil smell like memory. They bled the brakes, ran a fresh fuel line, improvised a throttle linkage from a part that had belonged to a lawnmower in another lifetime. The coil arced once, like a test, the distributor seated with a tiny, correct click. Maria's hands shook, not from fear now, but from awareness, the feeling that the next few seconds would either be another chapter or the back cover. Moment of truth, Janine said in the voice people use right before opening a door they can't close. Ready? Not at all, Maria said, and turned the key. The engine coughed once, like a man waking in a room he doesn't recognize, then settled into a lope that was half apology and half promise. The idol hunted, found itself, hunted again, and then the sound evened into something with shoulders and grace. The Camaro became a thing alive. Maria laughed like she had been holding it in since she was 12 and saw a roofline at a stoplight. Cal wiped his eyes in a way that pretended to be about dust. Janine whooped so loud, the jukebox took offense and switched songs. Tapp stuck his head in the door and nodded once, as if to say, there you are, and left the moment to the people who had earned it. You did it, Cal said.
We did it, Maria corrected. And then her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She didn't answer it. Then it buzzed again, and again. The fourth time she put it on speaker and set it on the cowl. Cole's voice came polite and far away. "Congratulations," he said. "I could hear it from the street. Beautiful sound. Here's the part you won't enjoy. The ledger doesn't belong to you. Bring it to the corner of Ash and Vine at dusk. Come alone." "No," Maria said, and hung up. It rang again immediately. A text followed. "Pictures of your shop. Pictures of the truck. We're neighbors now." Janine swore softly in a language she had learned from timing belts. Taps's jaw went sideways, the way men's jaws go when they've decided to test whether their teeth can cut rope. "Trap," Janine said. "Of course, but a trap for who?" They made a plan in words and glances. Taps called two friends who owed him for forgetting to return tools 5 years ago. The bikers from the diner reappeared like wolves who had heard a whistle only wolves can hear. Cal wrote a note and put it in the ledger's place, the way you leave a coin for a fairy that might be a thief. Janine checked the brake bar for balance and the flashlight for more than symbolism. Dusk knelt on Ash and Vine with its hands in its pockets. Cole stood under a streetlight with the casual arrogance of a man who believes light belongs to him. 2 men flanked him, 2 more at the corners, the tail of a black SUV visible like a shark fin where the alley met the street. Maria walked in with her hands empty and her back straight. She had the ledger in a canvas bag over her shoulder. She did not look behind her, where she knew Janine and Taps's friends were ghosts against roofs and shadows. Punctuality, the last virtue of the doomed. "You'll want to update your list," Maria said. "Bring a pen." He smiled. "Clever is a young woman's currency. You'll need a different wallet soon." He held out his hand. "Ledger." "On one condition," Maria said. "You read something out loud, here, now." His eyebrows lifted, amused. "And if I don't?" "You get the ledger anyway, but you walk away knowing you missed the last chance to be human." He considered, curiosity briefly tripping arrogance. "Very well," he said. "What page?" She handed him a folded sheet, Cal's note. He unfolded it. His voice, which had been smooth, even when he said ugly things, roughened as he read.
"I was there," he recited. "I told the boys nobody would get hurt. I lied. I took Ruth's envelopes and I asked Hayes to drive. I am the debt you've been paying for 40 years, Cal. Cole." Silence landed with both boots. Even his men looked at him. Cole's mask slipped a quarter inch, enough to show the bruise beneath. "What is this?" he hissed. "Truth," Cal said, stepping from a doorway behind him, older and taller than the last time the past had looked him in the eye. The bikers ghosted out of the alley behind the SUV. Taps's friends appeared on the roofline like Conscience with crowbars. Cole laughed. Too loud. "You think this is proof?" he asked. "A note signed with the name you want to hate?" "No," Maria said. "We think it's practice. For court. For newspapers. For that tired conscience you drag behind you." She set the canvas bag down. "Take the ledger. Make whatever copies you need to feel safe. But a copy of the note goes with you too. Every time you open that book, you'll find your own voice telling you who you are." He stepped forward, rage turning his face into a younger man's. "You don't get to—" "Ruth Delaney sends her regards," Janine called from the roofline and tossed a paint can. It exploded on the pavement at Cole's feet in a white blossom. The men flinched. The moment broke. The SUV's door opened like a bite, then closed again when it saw the shadows waiting for it. Cole lifted the bag, the ledger now heavier by the ounce of truth. He met Cal's eyes, and Maria's. "This isn't over," he said. "It is," Cal replied. "You just don't know how to live in a world where it is." They left him under the streetlight with the ledger and a name he couldn't wash off his hands. The night exhaled. Somewhere far away, a train blew a single mournful note, as if time had just changed tracks. Back at the shop, the Camaro looked different, though nothing visible had changed. Some objects carry the weather around them. This one had begun to generate its own forecast. Maria slid into the driver's seat, just springs and memory, and laid both hands on the wheel. "Ready?" Janine asked. "As I'll ever be," Maria said. They cracked the bay door enough to let the world in, but not enough to invite it to stay. The engine idled patient and low. Maria eased the clutch that wasn't fully adjusted, felt the rear axle consider the weight of choice, and let the car inch forward. The tires kissed asphalt for the first time under power in decades. The Camaro rolled into evening, a ship leaving dry dock and remembering how water works. They made a slow lap of the lot, then another. The brakes complained in the dignified way of elders asked to dance. The steering box offered opinions. The engine smoothed out as if forgiving them in real time. When they pulled back into the bay, Cal put his hand on the fender and closed his eyes. "I told Hayes I'd bring it home. Took me long enough." "He'll forgive you," Maria said. Cal's smile was private. Maybe he just did. They left the car to cool and walked to the diner next door, because Greece is a religion and you should always pray after a miracle. Ruth Delaney was waiting at a corner booth, as if she had decided the answer to her own question while sewing a seam and locking the shop. She looked at the three of them, then at the window where the Camaro's roofline made a new horizon. "Show me," she said. They brought her to the bay like you bring someone to a cradle. Ruth walked around the car once, twice. She paused at the cowl and laid her fingers where the paint had sanded itself into primer. She didn't cry. She didn't speak. Finally, she reached into her pocket and brought out a sliver of chrome trim, curved like a smile.
"I kept this," she said, placing it on the fender. "You'd be surprised what you can fit in a pocket when you're leaving a life." Maria nodded like a student being given a better pencil. "We'll put it back where it goes," she said. Ruth looked at her. "Where are you going to put the rest?" she asked. "The part that isn't metal." "In the seat seams," Janine said. "In the places nobody looks. That's where we tuck our futures." Ruth's laugh was small and true. "Start it," she said. The engine caught on the second turn, like a memory arriving on time. Ruth closed her eyes. When she opened them, something in her had come forward and something else had stepped back. "You did it right," she said. "Or anyway, you did it honest. That's the only right there is." Cal touched the ring on the bench. "This is yours," he told Ruth. She shook her head. "It was mine," she said. "Then it was Hayes's. Now it belongs to the car. Leave it there." She pointed at the dash. "Glue it under that lip where nobody will ever know, except the person who loves it enough to look." Maria did it with the care of a woman who trusts ritual more than luck. The ring vanished into a shadow that had waited for it for half a century. They talked until the diner closed, and the jukebox decided it had sung enough. Taps locked the row and went home to whatever men like Taps call a home. The night grew the kind of quiet that isn't empty but full. When the last light clicked off, Maria stayed. She sat in the driver's seat, the world a charcoal drawing outside. She thought of the ad she'd read, the 6 lines that had smelled like a dare, and of all the lines since that had tried to write her smaller. Cal's voice came from the dark. "You did a big thing." "No," she said, "we did a just thing. Big is for buildings, just is for people." He chuckled, then sobered. "Cole will try again. Men like him keep ledger books in their heads when you take the paper ones." "I know, but we don't scare easy anymore." He nodded as if he could see it. Hayes always said a car is a kind of prayer. You say what you want when you start it, and you find out who you are when you stop it. I want to be the person who finishes what other people had to drop, and the person who doesn't drop what she starts. "That'll do," he said softly. "That'll more than do." They planned a small thing and called it a party. Ruth in the passenger seat, Cal in the back like the uncle who says he's not crying, Janine with a camcorder that still believes in tapes, Taps leaning on the bay door like a bouncer who likes seeing happy trouble. They would loop the block legally, but with feeling. They would come back and eat grocery store cake with their hands. On the day, the sun was stupid with generosity. Birds argued about whatever birds argue about. Maria tightened the last bolt that didn't need tightening and turned the key the way you shake a hand before an interview. The car answered. They rolled onto Ash like an apology being accepted. Neighbors came out because sound does that.
Two kids pointed and grinned wide enough to earn dental lectures later. Ruth kept one hand on the dash like you do when you're steadying yourself for tears you don't want to ruin your eyeliner with. At the corner, the light turned green as if the universe had been practicing. Maria eased the throttle and the engine went from idle to intention. They made the turn. The world didn't become new, but it consented to be better. Cole stood on the sidewalk beside a newsstand, tie loosened, eyes calculating. He watched the Camaro pass, not like a hunter, but like a man who has seen a storm respect a house. He didn't raise a hand. He didn't speak. He looked smaller, not because he had shrunk, but because the thing in front of him had finally been seen at the right distance. Back in the bay, after the cheers and the cake and Tapps's attempt at a toast that devolved into throat-clearing and a threat to raise the rent if anyone got sentimental, Ruth pulled a silver marker from her pocket. "You asked for this," she said to Janine. She leaned in and signed the inside of the glove box door, small, neat. Ruth Delaney, 1968 to 2000. She said, "Leave the last two blank for a year that feels like a promise." Cal added HL under the dash beside where the ring slept, tiny as a secret and twice as stubborn. Janine drew a bow tie, no bigger than a freckle, next to both, then wiped her eyes with the back of a hand she would later claim had grease in it. The evening leaned into night again. People went home to the lives that waited like dogs behind doors. Maria stayed to sweep the floor, because sweeping after joy writes it into the concrete. She found a washer that had fallen from someone's pocket a decade ago and kept it. For luck. She told the Camaro, and the car seemed to sit a little taller. She locked the bay and stood in the lot. Above, the sky had decided to be clear. Stars did what stars do, insisted on being looked at. Her phone buzzed one last time, a number she recognized by dread. She answered. Cole's voice had lost some of its smooth and none of its memory. "You think you won," he said. "I think we finished," she said. Different kind of verb. A pause. "There are other cars, other ledgers." "Then there are other women, other co-ops, other rings that belong under other dashes." He chuckled, the sound of a man filing a grudge under pending. "Until next time. Maybe there won't be one." She hung up. She went back inside and sat behind the wheel. The shop held the smell of warm metal and paper that has finally told the truth. She rested her forehead on the rim of the wheel and let the exhaustion come. Every bolt turned, every tense phone call, every corridor walked in county buildings that smell like policy and mop water. "Okay," she whispered to the car. "We did the first lap. Tomorrow, we start learning each other for real." She could see it. Road trips that smelled like pine and gasoline, Ruth in the passenger seat narrating the map the way people narrate songs, Cal dozing with his cap pulled low, Janine insisting the radio be loud enough to be a third axle. Cars at stoplights that look over and nod because some machines recognize each other. A life built on what she could sell, but on what she could keep. She turned off the lights. The shop went quiet in the good way. The Camaro clicked softly as metal cooled and remembered. Outside, the world kept doing what it does, being loud and beautiful and unfinished. Inside, a woman who had once bought a non-running car for $700 finally closed her eyes, not to hide from anything, but to gather strength for the next start.